If the book of Jubilees never existed, and we're in ancient Israel, and Yahweh says, "Come to my sacred assembly," it's a feast of Yahweh. You cannot show up saying, "Oh, I'm fasting, but thank you." You cannot. It's a feast of Yahweh. Bring forth your animal.
Let's take a look at fasting on the Shabbat. Or whoever fasts or makes war on the Shabbats, the man who does any of these things on the Sabbath shall die. Black and white, right? No extra instructions. No, well, if you do this and if you do that, just black and white. If you fast on the Shabbat, you die. The Book of Jubilees states fasting on the Shabbat is a sin leading to death. No need for quotes here, as we all know that Moses, Elijah, and Messiah fasted 40 days, which would have included several Sabbaths. Are they in error? Well, one could say Jubilees 50 must be talking about fast in less than 7 days. And that's what I said in my mind as I was studying the book for years. I'm like, well, they've got to mean that. Perhaps. However, it doesn't give us any indication of this. All it says is if you fast on the Shabbat, you will die. Is Messiah the sinless one or not? Is my question to you. No.
Okay. So there's some assumptions, like last time, there's some assumptions here that fasting on Shabbat is an erroneous or added to instruction from Jubilees that's not in the Torah, but let's respectfully, that's in my understanding, that would be incorrect. So let's go back into Leviticus first. At some point, people are actually going to listen to what we say when we say everything that Jubilees teaches, we can show you in the scriptures. At some point, somebody out there may actually take it seriously that we've put in some due diligence to study this topic. So Leviticus 23, the feasts and Sabbaths of the Lord. Verse 1, the Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, these are my appointed feasts, the feasts of the Lord, that you are to proclaim as assembly, sacred assemblies. For 6 days work may be done, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of complete rest, a day of sacred assembly. You must not do any work where you live. It's a Sabbath to the Lord." Okay. In the first 3 verses of an entire chapter that tells you about all the Sabbaths, plural, of the Lord. All the Sabbaths of the Lord. All the Sabbaths. All these Sabbaths, it starts off with the weekly. Before it talks about the weekly, it gives you an overview statement. Speak to the Israelites and say to them, these, plural, are my appointed feasts, plural. The feasts of Yahweh, plural, that you are to proclaim as sacred assemblies. And then it tells you about the first sacred assembly that's mentioned, the weekly Sabbath. Plural, feasts of Yahweh. Feasts of Yahweh. On the Passover, should you attend Passover, which is a Sabbath, a feast of Yahweh, can you attend Passover and fast and not eat the Passover meal? What are we talking about? Sabbaths, feasts, sacred assemblies. Yahweh directly introduces his feasts that are called sacred assemblies. And then the first one he starts off with, the weekly Sabbath. It's a feast, it's a sacred assembly. You shouldn't fast on that day. It's a feast. Do you fast on a feast? No fasting on days that Yahweh declares feasting should happen. Okay. Just pausing for a dramatic effect to just kind of let that set in. Feasts are not fasts. You cannot fast when God declares, come and feast. Because Yahweh is called a sacred assembly. That means show up. What can you do when you show up? You can't fast. It's right here, guys. The fact that Jubilees just articulates the concept is not adding to the Torah. Again, because we don't define the Torah according to Rabbinic Judaism. It's not just Genesis through Deuteronomy. The instructions of God are Torah, and they're found in many more books than just Genesis through Deuteronomy.